chicken, and Racksole assisted him in the consumption of a bottle of Heidsieck Monopole, Carte d'Or. 'This chicken is almost perfectly grilled,' said Babylon at length. 'It is a credit to the house. But why, my dear Racksole, why in the name of Heaven did you quarrel with Rocco?' 'Then you've heard?' 'Heard? My dear friend, it was in every newspaper on the Continent. Some journals prophesied that the Grand Babylon would have to close its doors within half a year, now that Rocco had deserted it. But of course I knew better. I knew that you must have a good reason for allowing Rocco to depart, and that you must have made arrangements in advance for a substitute.' 'As a matter of fact, I had not made arrangements in advance,' said Theodore Racksole, a little ruefully. 'But happily we found in our second sous chef an artist inferior only to Rocco himself. That, however, was mere good fortune.' 'Surely,' said Babylon, 'it was indiscreet to trust to mere good fortune in such a serious matter.' 'I didn't trust to mere good fortune. I didn't trust to anything except Rocco, and he deceived me.' 'But why did you quarrel with him?' 'I didn't quarrel with him. I found him embalming a corpse in the State bedroom one night.' 'You what?' Babylon almost screamed. 'I found him embalming a corpse in the State bedroom,' repeated Racksole in his quietest tones. The two men gazed at each other, and then Racksole replenished Babylon's glass. 'Tell me,' said Babylon, settling himself deep in an easy chair and lighting a cigar. And Racksole thereupon recounted to him the whole of the Posen episode, with every circumstantial detail so far as he knew it. It was a long and complicated recital, and occupied about an hour. During that time little Felix never spoke a word, scarcely moved a muscle. Only his small eyes gazed through the bluish haze of smoke. The clock on the mantelpiece tinkled midnight. 'Time for whisky and soda,' said Racksole, and got up as if to ring the bell, but Babylon waved him back. 'You have told me that this Sampson Levi had an audience of Prince Eugen today, but you have not told me the result of that audience,' said Babylon. 'Because I do not yet know it, but I shall doubtless know tomorrow. In the meantime I feel fairly sure that Levi declined to produce Prince Eugen's required million. I have reason to believe that the money was lent elsewhere.' 'Mused Babylon, and then, carelessly, 'I am not at all surprised at that arrangement for spying through the bathroom of the State apartments.' 'Why are you not surprised?' 'Oh,' said Babylon, 'it is such an obvious dodge, so easy to carry out. As for me, I took special care never to involve myself in these affairs. I knew they existed, I somehow felt that they existed. But I also felt that they lay outside my sphere. My business was to provide board and lodging of the most sumptuous kind to those who didn't mind paying for it. And I did my business. If anything else went on in the hotel, under the rose, I long determined to ignore it unless it should happen to be brought before my notice. And it never was brought before my notice. However, I admit that there is a certain pleasurable excitement in this kind of affair, and doubtless you have experienced that.' 'I have,' said Racksole simply, 'though I believe you are laughing at me.' 'By no means,' Babylon replied. 'Now what, if I may ask the question, is going to be your next step?' 'That is just what I desire to know myself,' said Theodore Racksole. 'Well,' said Babylon after a pause, 'let us begin. In the first place, it is possible you may be interested to hear that I happened to see Jules today.' 'You did?' Racksole remarked with much calmness. 'Where?' 'Well, it was early this morning, in Paris, just before I left there. The meeting was quite accidental, and Jules seemed rather surprised at meeting me. He respectfully inquired where I was going, and I said that I was going to Switzerland. At that moment I thought I was going to Switzerland. It had occurred to me that after all I should be happier there, and that I had better turn back and not see London any more. However, I changed my mind once again, and decided to come on to London, and accept the risks of being miserable there without my hotel. Then I asked Jules whither he was bound, and he told me that he was off to Constantinople, being interested in a new French hotel there. I wished him good luck, and we parted.' 'Constantinople, eh?' said Racksole. 'A highly suitable place for him, I should say.' 'But,' Babylon resumed, 'I caught sight of him again.' 'Where?' 'At Charing Cross, a few minutes before I had the pleasure of meeting you. Mr Jules had not gone to Constantinople after all. He did not see me, or I should have suggested to him that in going from Paris to Constantinople it is not usual to travel via London.' 'The cheek of the fellow!' exclaimed Theodore Racksole. 'The gorgeous and colossal cheek of the fellow!' Chapter 22 In the Wine Cellars of the Grand Babylon. 'Do you know anything of the antecedents of this Jules?' asked Theodore Racksole, helping himself to whisky. 'Nothing whatever,' said Babylon. 'Until you told me, I don't think I was aware that his true name was Thomas Jackson, though of course I knew that it was not Jules. I certainly was not aware that Miss Spencer was his wife, but I had long suspected that their relations were somewhat more intimate than the nature of their respective duties in the hotel absolutely demanded. All that I do know of Jules, who will always be called Jules, is that he gradually, by some mysterious personal force, acquired a prominent position in the hotel. Decidedly he was the cleverest and most intellectual waiter I have ever known, and he was specially skilled in the difficult task of retaining his own dignity while not interfering with that of other people. I am afraid this information is a little too vague to be of any practical assistance in the present difficulty.' 'What is the present difficulty?' Racksole queried, with a simple air. 'I should imagine that the present difficulty is to account for the man's presence in London.' 'That is easily accounted for,' said Racksole. 'How? Do you suppose he is anxious to give himself up to justice, or that the chains of habit bind him to the hotel?' 'Neither,' said Racksole. 'Jules is going to have another try, that's all.' 'Another try at what?' 'At Prince Eugen. Either at his life or his liberty. Most probably the former this time. Almost certainly the former. He has guessed that we are somewhat handicapped by our anxiety to keep Prince Eugen's predicament quite quiet, and he is taking advantage of that fact. As he already is fairly rich, on his own admission, the reward which has been offered to him must be enormous, and he is absolutely determined to get it. He has several times recently proved himself to be a daring fellow. Unless I am mistaken, he will shortly prove himself to be still more daring.' 'But what can he do? Surely you don't suggest that he will attempt the life of Prince Eugen in this hotel?' 'Why not? If Reginald Dimmock fell on mere suspicion that he would turn out unfaithful to the conspiracy, why not Prince Eugen?' 'But it would be an unspeakable crime, and do infinite harm to the hotel.' 'True,' Racksole admitted, smiling. Little Felix Babylon seemed to brace himself for the grasping of his monstrous idea. 'How could it possibly be done?' he asked at length. 'Dimmock was poisoned.' 'Yes, but you had Rocco here then, and Rocco was in the plot. It is conceivable that Rocco could have managed it. Barely conceivable. But without Rocco I cannot think it possible. I cannot even think that Jules would attempt it. You see, in a place like the Grand Babylon, as probably I needn't point out to you, food has to pass through so many hands that to poison one person without killing perhaps 50 would be a most delicate operation. Moreover, Prince Eugen, unless he has changed his habits, is always served by his own attendant, old Hans, and therefore any attempt to tamper with the cooked dish immediately before serving would be hazardous in the extreme.' 'Granted,' said Racksole. 'The wine, however, might be more easily got at. Had you thought of that?' 'I had not,' Babylon admitted. 'You are an ingenious theorist, but I happen to know that Prince Eugen always has his wine opened in his own presence. No doubt it would be opened by Hans. Therefore the wine theory is not tenable, my friend.' 'I do not see why,' said Racksole, 'and I very seldom drink it, but it seems to me that a bottle of wine might be tampered with while it was still in the cellar, especially if there was an accomplice in the hotel.' 'You think, then, that you are not yet rid of all your conspirators?' 'I think that Jules might still have an accomplice within the building.' 'And that a bottle of wine could be opened and recorked without leaving any trace of the operation?' Babylon was a trifle sarcastic. 'I don't see the necessity of opening the bottle in order to poison the wine,' said Racksole. 'I've never tried to poison anybody by means of a bottle of wine, and I don't lay claim to any natural talent as a poisoner, but I think I could devise several ways of managing the trick. Of course, I admit I may be entirely mistaken as to Jules' intentions.' 'Ah,' said Felix Babylon, 'the wine cellars beneath us are one of the wonders of London. I hope you are aware, Mr Racksole, that when you bought the Grand Babylon you bought what is probably the finest stock of wines in England, if not in Europe. in the valuation.